Jiddo, what are you singing about? Every day I hear you singing about something, but I've never heard that one. What does it mean?
شو هالحكي؟ مش عم تفهم اللي عم بحكيه؟ لازم تفهم يا جدي.
Okay, I get you're talking about Lebanon, but so what? What's the big deal? Jiddo, I'm from Canada, born and raised here. Lebanon is halfway across the world. I don't have any ties to it.
إيه بس يا حبيبي أنت أصلك لبناني. We should be proud of. لبنان يا جدي is the temple of God. And there we learned the values of humanity from the dawn of time. Lebanon has been the haven of intellect and the love of adventure. Lebanon taught understanding and collaboration and taught the word, the mastery of the seas and travels afar.
Wait, Jiddo, are you talking about those Phoenicians that traveled? I thought I heard about those in school. Is it really true that they invented the first boats and created the alphabet?
Our ancestors, ya Jiddi, are the Phoenicians, and they did invent the alphabet. They also established the means of communication throughout the world. Let's go back in time. Greek mythology speaks about how Zeus kidnapped Europa, the daughter of the king of Tyre, and he named an entire continent after her. Her brother Cadmus traveled to go find her, teaching the Phoenician alphabet to those along his way. In the year 2000 BC, while he was still in Greece, he founded the city of Thebe and became its king. The story also talks of how the people of Jbeil used to make the greatest paper in the world and thereby called all books by the name of their city, Byblos.
Really, Jiddo? You're saying this small nation had that much influence on the world that they named the Bible after one of our towns? That's kind of amazing.
And not only that, ya Jiddi, 1500 years later, another princess and daughter of the king of Tyre, Elisar, fled her homeland and founded the city of Carthage. The Mediterranean Sea, which was the Sea of Tyre, became known as the Sea of Carthage. Its citizens navigated as far as the North and Baltic Sea. Britain was their secret mine of tin.
Carthage is well known. It was the greatest seaport in the world at that time and for many generations after too.
We won't speak in length of the military genius Hannibal and how he defied the Roman, conquered their homeland, and remained in Italy for 15 years. Instead, let me tell you about the great navigator Hanun and how he circled the entire African coast. Hanun was so far ahead of his time that it was not until 1800 years later did the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama followed his steps. And in the year 1499, the way was finally paved to India. Hey ya Jiddi is but a small portion of what Lebanon's contribution was to the world from the past until now. And that is why we are so proud to be connected to our beloved Lebanon.
Well, I certainly didn't wake up today thinking I would get a history lesson, but this is all really interesting. Now, I remember in church this past Sunday, the priest talked about Jesus' role in Lebanon, but I was a little bit late, so I didn't hear it all.
أوف كم مرة بدي أقول لك تقوم بكير على القداس باسم الآب والابن والروح القدس. Anyways, المسيح came to Lebanon, toured our lands and performed many miracles. Eusebius, the historian of the church, says that the first miracle was performed in Lebanon, بقانا التي إلى صيدون العظيم. But we say that Lebanon is the miracle.
So what was his first miracle?
It was at the wedding of Cana that Jesus transformed water into wine. Later on, and when they were persecuted, the disciples of Jesus took refuge in Lebanon and witnessed his work. They named the south of Lebanon the land of the Annunciation, يعني بلاد البشارة. The first council after the apostles was in Tyre, and this united more than 300 bishops.
So the Christians at that time already had churches and priests. How does Tyre fit into this whole thing? Is that where the Maronites came from?
Antioch was the first place where the followers of Jesus were called Christian. From this region, we learned of Maron, who fled the city to take refuge in the mountains. His disciples included Simon the Stylist, يعني سمعان العمودي, who followed in his way and spread prayers and miracles throughout the land. John Maron, يعني يوحنا Maron, another disciple, came to Lebanon, fleeing injustice and persecution. Those that gathered and lived following the teaching of Maron became known as the Maronites. This formation occurred 500 years after Jesus. Afterward, there became a rift between the East and the West, but the Maronites continued to bear the torch of the spirit of adventure and openness.
Oh, I didn't know that's how the Maronite rite began.
It is also very important for you to know that Lebanon was forgotten for many years. Around the end of the 11th century, the West then remembered the Holy Land, and there started the Crusades. Once again, Lebanon became the meeting place of cooperation between the East and the West. In 1250, Saint Louis, يعني Saint Louis, known as King Louis IX of France, was taken captive when visiting the East, and the Maronites stepped in to contribute to the ransom for his release. The Maronites also sent a cohort of 25,000 horsemen to provide King Louis an armed escort back from Egypt. The king, in return, created a charter declaring the Maronite nation a part of the French nation. The Maronite nation faced injustice in the period of the Mamluk, and many had emigrated to Cyprus, Crete, and Malta, but those who stayed continued the journey.
Wow, they had that much support and resources? How did the Maronites continue to expand?
Well, after the difficult time of the Mamluk, a new era came with the cooperation of the Prince of Lebanon, Fakhreddin al-Awwal, and the Ottomans to get rid of the Mamluk, followed by his grandson, Fakhreddin al-Thani, who was raised among the Maronites. Lebanon regained then its relations with the world through Tuscany and Italy. The Pope ordered the establishment of the Maronite school in Rome to bridge the gap between the East and the West. Many graduates of this school contributed to the return of education to Lebanon. The graduates got acquainted with the West and spread across the emerging countries of Europe, and thus al-Sum'ani, wal-Haqlani, wal-Sahyuni were among great thinkers who contributed to the European Enlightenment. This created a popular French saying, savant comme un Maronite. After that, the Maronites brought the printing press to the Quzhaya monastery and opened the school of Ain Warqa so that it became more accessible than the school in Rome. It helped to accommodate many more students, and the Maronite orders started to prosper in the Valley of the Saints and established a community of workers in the field of the Lord.
Jiddo, I could not have imagined that the Maronites had such a big impact back then.
So not a very big deal, eh?
Haha, sorry Jiddo. Maybe I shouldn't brush off everything. I get it now. But what did the Maronites add to help in the progress of their surrounding in the Middle East?
In 1736, about 50 years before the French Revolution, the Lebanese Council in Louaisi was held. This established the foundation of the modern Renaissance in the Middle East. The most important contribution of the Council included the adoption of the Arabic as a language instead of Syriac to help spread the knowledge, the expansion of compulsory education to the young people, which meant the eradication of illiteracy starting in their community, the equality among everybody, especially between man and woman. This was a significant contribution given that the movement of equality came way before most of the constitution of the world. These steps strengthened the roots of the Maronites in Lebanon and their propagation on all its land, which is really where life began to turn around for the Maronites.
What do you mean life began to turn around? You're telling me there was a renaissance in Lebanon even before it occurred in Europe, and the equality of man and woman was declared hundreds of years before America.
Well, since Europe had already become open to a new world and was no longer very concerned with the Middle East, this decreased the conflict in the region. We ended up witnessing the return of trade and marine transportation, which played an important role in the Middle East. So with every chapter of injustice or every dream of wealth, the sea and travel used to push the people in a more positive direction to exploration and adventure. It seems that God loves this country so much that every time he saw that there were reasons for immigration, he would send somebody to strengthen our people's roots with the land. With the increase in injustice, a wave of saints emerged and overshadowed the evil. They acted as the hope and motivation for people to stay. The saints Charbel, Rafka, Hardini, and their likes, and recently Ya'qub al-Kabbushi, became the hope of the roses to bloom again and good to prevail.
That's great that things began to get better. So was it smooth sailing from then on?
No, not at all. By the end of the 19th century, America became the preferred destination for adventurers. Then Brazil and Argentina opened their doors to the people. The Civil War of Mount Lebanon in 1860-1864 became the motivation for many people to immigrate and settle in these new countries. In the First World War, Jamal Pasha, also known as the Butcher, يعني السفاح, نحن بنسميه جمال باشا السفاح, came to Lebanon, and just like those involved in the Armenian genocide, who kicked the Armenian out of Sicilia and the Syriacs out of Diyarbakir, his mission was to kick out Christians from Lebanon.
I didn't know World War I affected Lebanon, Jiddo. I thought it was just affected Europe. I can't believe your parents would have gone through it. Tell me more. So is that why everyone started fleeing Lebanon?
So Jamal Pasha started to hang people. Then he blocked access to Mount Lebanon in order to cut the food supply so that the people will die of hunger. This led to the deaths of half the population of Mount Lebanon, and this intensified the immigration for those who were able to flee. But the Lebanese people cannot forget their origin, heritage, history, ancestors, and the Holy Land. Even though they immigrated to the New World, they still brought with them their culture. For example, they created Rabit al-Qalamiyya, yani the Pen League in New York. This included Jubran Khalil Jubran, Mkhail Naimi, Wali Abu Madi, Umay Ziyadi, Amin Rihani, and other writers of the diaspora who wrote and reminded of Lebanon and brought back the nostalgia.
Oh, Jiddo, there's this new movie coming out called The Prophet, and everyone is talking about it and asking me if I know it since it's from my culture. So is that by Gibran Khalil Gibran? I wonder what made it so famous. Now I want to go back and tell my friends. What an amazing story.
Yes, it is an amazing story. But just like good cannot perish, evil can re-emerge. And so we, ya Jiddi, had to flee the Civil War conflict of 1975. and dispersed across the world to Australia, Canada, Sweden, and other nations. It was a difficult time to leave our home. It is true that you were born here and raised in this beautiful country that respects people. However, our country has something that will always pull us. Maybe it is the Word of God. Maybe it is the soil of the cedars. Or maybe it is the bones of the ancestors. But whatever it is, the seed of adventure that pulls out will pull you back to keep Lebanon in your heart and in your blood.
Wow, Jiddo. You really did go through so much. Your story is amazing. You're a much better teacher than my history teacher. I now have something to share with my kids when I have a family of my own one day. And I can be proud to continue in your footsteps, and especially be proud to be Lebanese. Thanks, Jiddo. How about we go grab some knefe from Adonis? I'm getting hungry.
في أطيب من الكنافة.